It's Nolan. Now, before we get started, make sure y'all hitting that like button. Make sure y'all sharing it on your respective platforms. Let somebody know what we're doing today. Now, let's get into the show. Lot of rappers ain't none of niggas like me. Keep on looking, won't find nobody like me. Y'all caps still can't do it like me. Wants to say she better find somebody like me. When I wake up, put my armor on. Crystal on my neck, it keep me shining like some armor off. Made it from the dirt, I keep a pistol, that's my bodyguard. Southside nigga learned a lot, it gave me caliber. Shout it came a long way, I was on my Kanye. Call it with no option, now we're dropping, trying to find a way. Bodies dropping broad day. I ain't had no industry connections, been the hardest in my section. Had to learn my own lessons, hopping studios. Lil' Jones, no Julio, play pretty Ricky like Rubio. Nigga, find myself inside a mobile home. Stepping back to reality, it's like soul to soul. Trying to run a business, didn't know the codes. Talking independence to promote a song. Couldn't get no hits on the Google Chrome. I'm blessed now. All the niggas try to play me stupid, got X-style. Gotta fill the room like a textile. If I leave the crib, it's for a check now. Had to change the plot. Made it to the top and barely low. If you talking, come correct. I got my eyes on private checks, nigga. What's going on, beautiful people? It's the kid J Nolan here. Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Industry, your number one source for music, entertainment, commentary, and breakdowns. Hope everybody's doing well out there on this Tuesday afternoon going into the evening. As y'all know, we've been keeping very close tabs on this whole Jay-Z, Jane Doe, Tony Busby situation, and new developments have come through. Of course, we've been talking about Jay-Z's lawsuit out in California against Tony Busby, but he's actually filed all new paperwork in Alabama federal court against the Jane Doe, who actually was the active participant in suing him for the alleged SA case. And he's also suing Tony Busby as well in the state of Alabama in a federal case. So let's go ahead and get to it, man, because I don't want to waste a lot of time. The accuser, and we'll just say the woman at this point because we know she on some bullshit. But she's also filed a declaration in the California lawsuit talking about she fears Jay-Z. So on one hand, in Alabama, Jay-Z has a statement in which he says that she's admitted to lying. But then in the California lawsuit, she's filed paperwork stating that she feels that she's been intimidated. So there's some contradictory stuff here. Somebody lying. We're going to get through all of it in just a moment. Let me go ahead and pull up Jay-Z's latest paperwork filing against Jane Doe and Tony Busby in Alabama federal court so that we can get the gist of everything that he's putting on their jackets. All right. United States District Court for the Southern District of Alabama, Mobile Division, or Mobile, however y'all want to say it, Mobile, whatever the fuck. You know what I'm saying? Because when it comes to these southern places, everybody criticize how you pronounce their shit. So we got Sean Corey Carter versus Anthony Busby, David Fortney, Anthony G. Busby, LP, the Busby Law Firm, and Jane Doe. So she is now included. Okay. Now remember, they alluded to the fact that they may have known who she was when everything was going on in her lawsuit, but they didn't want to out her. Okay. So introduction to Jay-Z's complaint says A, false, B, malicious, C, strategically and tactically calculated in time to inflict maximum pain and suffering on Mr. Carter, and D, in conspiracy with multiple attorneys, including defendants Anthony Busby and David Fortney, who, like her, were soullessly motivated by greed, in abject disregard of the truth and the most fundamental precepts of human decency. Okay. 2. These are the only truthful and fair descriptions of Jane Doe's and her lawyer's malevolent efforts to assassinate the impeccable and lifetime earned career of Sean Corey Carter, who is professionally known as Jay-Z, but more importantly, is known as dad and husband and son, and a human being who did nothing to deserve or elicit the wanton, depraved attack that Jane Doe, in conspiracy with her lawyers, launched to extort Mr. Carter beginning on November 5th, 2024 through a menacing private demand letter. Okay? So I ain't got no stains on my motherfucking jacket, but y'all coming around here just trying to throw mud on a nigga. Doe and her lawyers, Anthony Busby, David Fortney, and Anthony G. Busby LP, the Busby law firm, then brought before the world an in-court complaint, the impossibility and indeed absurdity of which was surpassed only by its vile malevolence in a desperate attempt to leverage Mr. Carter into an extortionate payoff, which these malicious actors presented as the only path for Mr. Carter to prevent the public prosecution of a lawsuit by Doe. When their initial extortionate demand letter failed to yield the financial windfall they sought, and after Doe told Busby, with whom she had never spoken before the demand letter was drafted and sent, that Mr. Carter did not SA her, Busby pushed her towards going forward with the false story against Mr. Carter to make the case better and get them, the lawyers and her, more money. Specifically, Busby brought Jay-Z into it. Okay? Busby then went forward with naming Mr. Carter with full knowledge by him, as imparted to him by Doe, that Mr. Carter had never assaulted Doe, and Doe's entire story as it related to Mr. Carter was completely fabricated. Doe has now voluntarily admitted directly to representatives of Mr. Carter that the story brought before the world in court and on global television was just that, a false, malicious story. She has admitted that Mr. Carter did not assault her, and that indeed it was Busby himself whom she met for the first time at a coffee shop in Houston on the day of her maliciously false NBC News interview, which is discussed in detail below, who pushed her to go forward with the false narrative of the assault by Mr. Carter in order to leverage a maximum payday. So he's saying that this Jane Doe and Tony Busby had never met up until the day that they did that weak-ass NBC interview that ultimately embarrassed her in front of the world and made all of her accusations and allegations legitimately fall apart on live television news. And then it was distributed in multiple areas on the internet to show that her own father could not corroborate her story, although he played a central part in picking her up and being the only known living person to know where she was that night. Allegedly. And he's saying that Tony Busby coerced her into putting Jay-Z's name into the lawsuit to secure a maximum payday. Okay? To compound this egregious harm, just last Friday, Busby's and Fortney's co-counsel, a prominent New York attorney in the now dismissed false action against Mr. Carter, threatened Mr. Carter's counsel to double down with yet another false public statement by Doe if Mr. Carter publicly revealed her admissions and Busby's and Fortney's misdeeds in Mr. Carter's pending California lawsuit against Busby. This is interesting. So they're saying if he were to come out and publicly reveal her admission of lying, right, then they were going to come back and double down with another false statement. Interesting. Fortunately and clearly unexpectedly from their perspective, Doe, Busby, and Fortney were met with nothing but righteous resolve at every turn by Mr. Carter. He stood steadfast, publicly decried the lies being put forth against him, and beat the civil conspiracy among malicious Doe and her malevolent soulless lawyers, driving them back into the shadows from which they came, resulting in the voluntary dismissal with prejudice without settlement of their false and malicious complaint on February 14th, 2025. Now notice they said here, dismiss with prejudice without settlement. There's some people out here on the internet that are under the belief and guise that Jay-Z paid Jane Doe off for her silence to dismiss voluntarily. They explicitly say here, without settlement, okay? Mr. Carter does not commence this action lightly. Following Jane Doe's admissions that she fabricated her claims against Mr. Carter, her lawyers have continued to seek to hide this reality, including through further extortionate threats and demands by Busby, Fortney, and their New York co-counsel on February 28th. So just 2 weeks after this was dismissed, there have been more extortionate threats and demands leveraged by Tony Busby and his co-counsel. Even after all this, Mr. Carter does not expose his malicious and wrongful accuser's identity in this complaint, seeking to maintain her anonymity as Doe, but the extortion and abuse of Mr. Carter by Doe and her lawyers must stop. So he's saying, I'm continuing to show her grace by not exposing who she is. I'm giving y'all the ultimate respect when I should not. But y'all gonna have to leave me alone, right? Because remember, Tony Busby, his so-called smoking gun, is another SA lawsuit, including a John Doe, a man, that they want to pin against Jay-Z and Diddy for another attempt. It hasn't professionally or legally been filed, but we do know about it because Busby has made reference to it multiple times. Therefore, Mr. Carter brings this lawsuit to hold Doe accountable for her willful defamation per se and her malicious prosecution of knowingly false allegations against Mr. Carter that Doe and her co-conspirator attorneys have falsely and maliciously peddled. We don't necessarily need to get to the parties because we know who all is involved here. We also know that this matter exceeds the sum or value of $75,000 plus exclusive of interest and costs and all of those different things. We don't have to go through that. So let's get to some more here. They say, after hiring the Busby law firm, Doe falsely accuses Mr. Carter of SA in written correspondence, court filings, and global television, which would be that NBC interview. So they say Doe appears to be suffering from personal and financial hardship. She lost custody of her children. Oh, God. And her parents, who on information and belief support Doe, recently filed for bankruptcy protection. So they get into her financial history saying that she is in a rough spot. She cannot maintain her children, and her kids, and her parents are supporting her financially at this moment. Okay? She even recently filed for bankruptcy. Desperate to obtain a payday, Doe hired the Busby law firm, which has a long history of whipping up a media frenzy with vague and sensational claims against public figures to extort payments from Mr. Carter under the threat of devastating harm to his reputation. And we know this to be true because Busby went on television multiple times and said that he would do this to multiple celebrities. As discussed below, Doe first attempted to extort Mr. Carter through an extortionate demand letter and an anonymous lawsuit, both from Busby. When Mr. Carter refused to capitulate to Doe's baseless demands, Doe doubled down by using the justice system to attempt to ruin Mr. Carter by formally naming him in a complaint, making horrific false allegations, and when that also failed, Doe resorted to defaming Mr. Carter on global television. Because remember, they wanted a quick settlement, easy, slide us something substantial, and we'll leave you alone forever. He said SMD. They said we going to the TV. A simple Google or other public record search of Doe by Busby and Fortney would have cast doubt on her credibility by revealing that, among other things, less than 90 days before sending the demand letter, she had been in court on mental health related issues in connection with her second-degree assault charge. Whoa. She been out here putting hands on people? Don't tell me you're an assailant. Accusing people of assault. They said they and had her bail revoked for failing a drug test. Whoa. She has several mental health disorders and takes multiple medications according to testimony from her psychiatrist laid bare in public court records, and she made 3 or other SA allegations which were either dropped or dismissed by courts. So they're saying that this woman here is, one, in financial duress. Okay? 2, less than 90 days before this allegedly, well, I won't even say allegedly, before this extortionate demand letter was sent out, she was in court on mental health related issues from a second-degree assault charge. And they revoked her bail for failing a drug test. They say that she has several mental health disorders, taking multiple medications, and she's made 3 other SA allegations on people that have proven to be meritless. Wow. And they still will not reveal who she is. So here they say Doe sues Sean Combs entities and does 1 through 10, Doe's 1 through 10, alleging that she was SA'd at an after party following the, you all know what happened or supposedly happened here. We all know the turn of events here. We don't got to go through this horse shit. Okay. Doe sends Mr. Carter an extortionate letter falsely accusing him of SA. A few weeks after filing the initial complaint from October, Doe, through Busby, sent Mr. Carter an extortionate letter dated November 5th containing false allegations of vile conduct by Mr. Carter that we also know took place. Doe threatened to take a different course if Mr. Carter did not commit to a confidential mediation to resolve this delicate and important matter by the deadline of November 19th, 2024, giving Mr. Carter only a 2-week window before she would go public with her false allegations. To avoid both public and criminal exposure, Busby stated that his client wants something of substance by way of a settlement. However, Doe had already sued Mr. Carter, albeit as one of the Doe's 1 through 10. Doe's plan was thus clear. She was demanding that Mr. Carter either A, pay something of substance to stop her from making public the wildly false allegations of SA that would subject Mr. Carter to opprobrium and irreparably harm his reputation, family, career, and livelihood, or endure that financial and personal ruin. Doe's statements and correspondence made clear the immediate and extensive threat of exposure if Mr. Carter failed to pay. Okay. C. Doe amends her lawsuit to falsely allege that Mr. Carter SA'd her. So unwilling to capitulate to Doe and Busby's extortion, November 18th came around. Mr. Carter filed the lawsuit of his own against Busby for extortion and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Mr. Carter explained that Busby was shamelessly attempted to extort exorbitant sums from him or else publicly file wildly horrific allegations against him. On December 8th, 2024, humiliated by Mr. Carter's lawsuit, Busby encouraged Doe to file, and Busby and Fortney filed a first amended complaint, revealing what Mr. Carter knew all along, that one of the Does was a placeholder for Mr. Carter if he did not pay her ransom. Nasty work. In Doe's first amended complaint, Doe makes wild, horrific, but utterly false allegations against Mr. Carter, substituting him for celebrity A from the earlier complaint. Then she goes on global television, falsely accusing Mr. Carter of these same things. December 13th, 2024, NBC News broadcasted portions of an exclusive interview of Doe, which was conducted with Fortney by her side. NBC News honored Doe's request to mask her identity. NBC News published a story excerpting interviews it held with Doe. During the interview, which was set up by Busby, was given on a voluntary basis, and in the presence of Fortney, Doe lied about Mr. Carter to a global television audience. In addition to attempting to explain the impossible, how she, as a 13-year-old from upstate New York, wound up in Manhattan at a private VMAs after party with countless celebrities, Doe told NBC News how she spoke with musicians Benji Madden and his brother at the after party. She recalled talking to Benji Madden about his tattoo, The Last Supper, because she has a religious background, so it was something to talk about. Doe repeated her claims that while at the after party, she had a drink that made her feel woozy, after which Combs and Mr. Carter took turns while an unidentified female celebrity watched. Doe told NBC that following the alleged SA, she found her way to a gas station where she called her father, who picked her up and drove her home. She states her father did not ask her what happened, what she did, or where she was. Instead, they rode home in silence for 5 hours and 47 minutes. And that's just given that they were in Manhattan or somewhere in that vicinity, not even taking into account that they tried to change the story toward the end of the paperwork war, legal war, to say that they were possibly at Diddy's Hampton's house, which would have increased that ride by an additional 2 hours. Stupid motherfuckers. All of those allegations against Mr. Carter were demonstrably false. Those allegations about Mr. Carter are false and defamatory, and her mendacity is clear, including to the reporters at NBC News. First, although Doe stated that the assault occurred at a residence, Mr. Carter was at no such residence. Indeed, NBC News located photos of Mr. Carter from that evening showing him at a party at a commercial location, the now closed Lotus nightclub in New York City. Of course, a private nightclub cannot be mistaken for a large white residence with a gated U-shaped driveway that included a large living room or foyer, a hallway containing several rooms off of it, and a bedroom. Even Busby admitted to NBC that Doe does not claim that assault occurred at Lotus nightclub. Second, Doe told NBC that she spent 20 minutes in the limo before arriving at the residence. However, when pressed about these details in a follow-up interview with NBC, Doe admitted that she did not know where she was going or even how long the drive took. Worse, she conceded to NBC that she guessed about the length of time the trip had taken in the lawsuit. So everything was fuzzy, wuzzy, wuzzy, except the fact that it was Jay-Z and Diddy. Interesting. Third, as to her description of a supposed conversation with Benji Madden during her interview with NBC News, a representative from Madden confirmed to NBC that neither he nor his brother Joel attended the 2000 VMAs and that they and their band Good Charlotte were on tour in the Midwest at that time. When confronted with this evidence, she conceded she made a mistake in identifying them and that not all the faces at the after party were clear, but I thought his tattoo was crystal. Miss Last Supper, you about to have your last supper of freedom soon, fucking around. Anyway. Fourth, regarding her long pre-drawn drive home with her father, Doe's father told NBC that he does not recall picking her up, which unsurprisingly would have been something that would definitely stick in my mind. He said that he learned of the alleged assault when Doe was interviewed by NBC News in December and that he did remember once picking Doe up in the middle of a night, but it was a local drive. Based on their address in Rochester, New York, Doe's father would have driven at least 5 hours and 47 minutes to pick her up. And there are countless other falsehoods in Doe's allegations. For instance, despite alleging that it took 20 minutes to get from Radio City Music Hall to the after party, there was no houses matching Doe's description within 20 minutes of Radio City Music Hall. And although she implies that Combs hosted the after party, none of Combs' properties match Doe's description of the location of the after party. Moreover, Doe alleges that after the VMAs began, much of the crowd moved inside, but Doe, without a ticket, remained outside with others and watched the VMAs on a Jumbotron. But the broadcast of the VMAs conclusively shows there was no Jumbotron, another lie. Indeed, the producer of the 2000 VMAs and the NYPD confirmed that there was no such Jumbotron since their permit application was denied. Even if Doe was outside the VMAs as she claims, she could not have approached celebrity limousines because they were only outside of Radio City Music Hall briefly for celebrity pickup and drop off. In any event, the celebrity limousines were separated from fans by police barricades, as publicly available video of the event clearly shows. Unless you was out there jumping barricades, Crash Bandicoot. NBC confronted Doe regarding this substantial contradictory evidence, which it had uncovered in less than a week after conducting the initial interview. In a follow-up phone interview, in response, Doe admitted she made some mistakes. She also disavowed the allegations in her complaint about the location of the alleged incident and admitted she was just guessing. But Doe did not drop her baseless complaint. She instead insisted on moving forward, including by offering to submit a polygraph, which never occurred or in any event has never seen the light of day, because she would have been polygassed by the people. But we would love to see it, Tony. Come on with it. Y'all, you the one that said it. Where you at with the polygraph? Let's take the lie detector test. Just for us. Because I don't even know if those are permissible in court. Doe waited months before dismissing her false complaint and did so after being lied to by her attorneys for their own benefit. Mr. Carter made several court filings repeatedly detailing the falsity of Doe's claims as revealed by her story's inconsistencies and the baselessness of various allegations. At each of these junctures, Doe was confronted with the false nature of her claim as well as the harm it was causing Mr. Carter. At any of these points, Doe could have withdrawn her lawsuit. Nevertheless, Doe continued to pursue her claim without regard to the harm it was causing or could cause Mr. Carter. She has now admitted that Mr. Carter did not assault her. Indeed, Busby, aware that Mr. Carter did not assault her, pushed her to make the false claim for money. And I think you're being extra lenient on her ass by putting all the onus on Tony Busby. I think she need to take responsibility for this shit. But that's just me. Having already sent the false and defamatory demand letters, having filed the false and defamatory complaint, and having already set Doe up to give the false and defamatory interview to NBC News, Busby, Fortney, and the Busby Law Firm were happy to perpetuate the lies and hold out hope for an unwarranted payment for them and Doe. Indeed, Busby went so far as to tell TMZ on December 10th, 2024, already fully aware of the falsity of the allegations, having met with Doe in Houston, that Doe was not ruling out filing charges against Mr. Carter, and that what happens next is up to my client. It's her case, and what she decides to do, you will find out in due course. However, the legal process got in the way of their scheme. Busby had signed the complaints in the action against Mr. Carter without being admitted to the bar of the United States District Court for Southern District of New York as required. When the judge presiding over the case was advised of this fact, she issued an order dated January 28, 2025, requiring Busby to file proof of admission to the SDNY on the docket by February 14, 2025. The very next day, January 29, 2025, Busby applied for such admission. On February 13th, one day before his deadline to file proof of admission in the SDNY, Busby got the news that because he had already filed pleadings in the SDNY without being admitted to the bar of the court, in the case at issue here and in more than 20 others, his application for admission had been denied. He was also instructed to attach a copy of the denial order to any subsequent application for admission in a particular case in the SDNY. And he knew full well he wasn't barred in this division or district. But he wanted, hey, we're not really trying to go to court here. We're just trying to threaten these mofos, back them down, and get a settlement. As long as they know we're serious, they'll settle. That's what he thought. Till he met a motherfucker that's more serious, and I know that ain't no motherfucking word. Faced with his inability to comply with the judge's order in the case against Mr. Carter, and facing a threat of punishment by the court, Busby dispatched Fortney to Alabama to meet with Doe that same day, namely February 13th. Ooh, y'all got inside information. Said he sent that motherfucker down to Alabama to, hey, shit getting a little critical out here. During that meeting, Fortney falsely, maliciously, and manipulatively told Doe that the case against Mr. Carter needed to be dismissed as Mr. Carter had made threats against Doe's life, and it was too dangerous to continue with the case. Of course, no such threats had ever been made. So Mr. Fortney, who is also an attorney, they're saying Tony Busby sent him down to Alabama to meet with this woman and lie in her face and say, hey, we're going to have to dismiss your case because Jay-Z said he's going to kill you. Now I understand why she's filed, or they've filed, paperwork in California as it pertains to Jay-Z's lawsuit in the state of Cali to say, oh, I feel intimidated. I've been threatened because David Fortney, I believe his name is, told her that in order to make her feel at ease about dropping the case. Hey, he said he gonna cut your lights off. Come the fuck on. Rather, Busby and Fortney were desperate to withdraw the false case or face punishment in court for their actions in filing a false pleading without Busby even being admitted to in the SDNY, jeopardizing their ability to continue with the more than 20 other cases they had pending. Thus, on the evening of Friday, February 14, 2025, Doe quietly filed her voluntary dismissal with prejudice. But the threats and extortion did not end with the dismissal of Doe's fraudulent lawsuit. Rather, on Friday, February 28th, after Doe admitted all of the foregoing, and after Busby became aware of those admissions, so she had already talked to somebody from Jay-Z's side, told them all of these things, that she thought her life was being threatened, as told by Mr. Fortney, that she needed to file a dismissal, right? She admitted that she lied. Sorry, I lied to you, Hove. Tony Busby became aware of those admissions, right? A prominent New York attorney serving as Busby's and Fortney's co-counsel called an attorney for Mr. Carter. During that call, Busby and Fortney's New York co-counsel threatened that if Mr. Carter's attorney filed anything in Mr. Carter's pending extortion and defamation case in California against Busby related to the statements made by Doe, fully exculpating Mr. Carter and inculpating her and Busby for extortion and conspiracy, that Busby would issue a public statement by Doe that she was being harassed by Mr. Carter's people since she dropped the lawsuit, and two, dropped the lawsuit only because she was afraid for her life, and that the allegations against Mr. Carter in the dropped lawsuit were all true. And just as this was released to the people, they literally went and did that immediately. Because I remember when I saw this come out yesterday, and within about an hour or two, there were reports of, oh, Jane Doe has spoken out, which is exactly as it was already predicted in this paperwork. Of course, Doe's allegations about being harassed by Mr. Carter's people since she dropped the lawsuit, and about her reasons for dropping the lawsuit, are and always were false. When Doe, Busby, and Fortney and their New York co-counsel said them, they knew or could have readily discovered through any reasonable inquiry that these statements were false. Thus, the threats of extortion and further defamation continue to this day, necessitating that Mr. Carter take action to prevent unscrupulous actors from further preying on him. Okay? You unscrupulous mofos. All right. So, malicious prosecution against all defendants. This is what they have here on October 20th. So we've already gone through all of this stuff, right? Threatening his reputation, his family's career, his livelihood, all that good stuff. He refused to take the extortion demands. They came forth, right? And then they threw his name in the mix. We know about all this stuff. Second cause of action, abusive process against all defendants. So he wants them to be charged under malicious prosecution. Second cause, abusive process. Civil conspiracy. When it comes to civil conspiracy, how do y'all come to that? All defendants agreed and worked together and knowingly and willfully conspired to maliciously prosecute and abuse the legal process against Mr. Carter. The defendants agreed to initiate and continue the false and malicious lawsuit in the shared objective of extorting Mr. Carter through false and damaging accusations, thereby causing harm to his reputation and financial well-being. In doing so, all defendants intended to harm Mr. Carter. One or more of the defendants took an overt act or acts to achieve malicious prosecution of Mr. Carter and to abuse the process of the courts against him. Defendant Busby, as her attorney, filed the initial lawsuit. So, got defamation down here, and of course he wants to be paid. He suffered substantial financial harm. He lost over $20 million in deals. He also suffered out-of-pocket expenses and emotional distress. being publicly scrutinized, people digging into his past and trying to find other areas of misconduct that still have never been proven true. People were trying to see if he was going to pop up on the Epstein list, which he did not. So I think he's justified in all he's got here. And of course, defamation. I mean, they defamed him. They tried to make him look like an offender, like he belonged on a registry. And they used the NBC interview as proof because she publicly went on television and said that he did these things. So that's what you get. All right. Whoa, hold on here. What's this piece at the end? They say, even upon having sufficient grounds to withdraw her false statements against Mr. Carter with the release of the NBC News article, Doe continued to threaten, through her attorney Anthony Busby, criminal prosecution against Mr. Carter and maintained the lawsuit. Doe did not have any reasonable grounds to support any truth in her statements and acted with reckless disregard for the truth. In fact, she recanted portions of her complaint when interviewed by NBC News, and when asked by the representative of Mr. Carter to come forward with the truth, she responded, "What's in it for me?" The hell you mean, what's in it for you? Prayer for relief. Wherefore, Sean Corey Carter respectfully, prays for judgment and relief against Jane Doe as to all causes of action, and Anthony Busby, David Fortney, and Anthony G. Busby, LP. They want an award of assumed and actual damages in an amount to be determined by the finder of fact. They want an award of punitive damages, reasonable costs, and legal fees, pre- and post-judgment interest, and any other relief that the court deems just and proper. Okay, he's demanding a jury trial, and we will see how this thing moves forward from here. Now, let's go to Jane Doe and her declaration in Jay-Z's California lawsuit against Tony Busby. So this here is Jane Doe's declaration that they filed in Jay-Z's lawsuit against Tony Busby in California for extortion and defamation, right? So she says, I, Jane Doe, declare as follows. I am over the age of 18, and I am the individual referred to as Jane Doe in the action Jane Doe versus Sean Combs et al. Case blase blah. Okay. I was granted permission to proceed under a pseudonym in the New York action and make this declaration under a pseudonym for the same reasons as in the New York action. I have personal knowledge of the facts set forth herein, which are known by me to be true and correct, and if called as a witness, I could and would competently testify thereto. So she's stating that she will be willing to testify on Tony Busby's behalf if needed. This declaration is submitted in support of the defendants, the Busby law firm on Anthony G and all of these motherfuckers. On Friday, February 21st, I was approached at my home by two individuals, a woman and a large man. They cornered me on my front porch and told me that they are investigators working with an attorney on behalf of Jay-Z. They asked me if I would be willing to sign an affidavit stating that my claims in the New York action were false. I refused. They also asked me if Mr. Busby sought me out as a client and whether Mr. Busby offered to pay me to pursue a false claim against Jay-Z. I told them that neither of those things ever happened, and I asked them to leave me alone. I felt intimidated and terrified at being confronted by these two individuals on my doorstep, and that they knew my name and home address despite me being anonymous in the New York action. I also understand that investigators approached my father and my mother multiple times. Two investigators approached my father and mother as my father was picking my mother up from a medical appointment, asking them similar questions about whether Mr. Busby had paid me and requesting that they sign affidavits stating that my claims were false. My father was separately approached later at a gas station, and my mother was separately approached at a store. In all instances, my parents refused to sign any affidavits, denied the investigators' claims about my case, and Mr. Busby's conduct and asked to be left alone. It is very alarming to me that Jay-Z's agents are looking for me and now know my whereabouts. Fear of intimidation and retaliation from Jay-Z and or his associates or fans is one of the reasons that I chose not to pursue the New York action and instructed my attorneys to dismiss it. So she says she feared Jay-Z, she feared his associates, and she's in fear of fans, although nobody know who the fuck she is other than Jay-Z and his legal team, I suppose. But we supposed to believe that the fans would harass you when motherfuckers been trying to figure out who the shadow is for months. Although I ultimately chose not to pursue them, I stand by my claims in the New York action, and I believe that I had a meritorious claim against Jay-Z. Oh, hell no. You finna recount this goddamn situation. I'm pissed. In September of 2000, when I was approximately 13 years old, I attended a party at a house in New York where Sean Combs and Jay-Z were present. I saw and recognized both men at the party. Well, what about when you saw and recognized Benji Madden and his brother? You saw and recognized them motherfuckers in a whole Last Supper tattoo too. That was never there. So we supposed to believe that you recognize these niggas though. At the party, I accepted a drink and began to feel lightheaded. I went into an empty bedroom to lie down by myself. Soon after that, Diddy, Jay-Z, and another individual entered the bedroom. Jay-Z removed my clothes and both Jay-Z and Diddy engaged in sexual intercourse with me. I did not consent to this, and given that I was only 13 at the time, I could not have given valid consent. In 2024, I signed up as a client with Ava Law Group. Ava Law Group partnered with the Busby law firm to pursue claims against Diddy and others, and my case was referred to the Busby law firm as a result. Several attorneys from the Busby law firm interviewed me extensively, including Anthony Busby. I authorized Mr. Busby and the Busby law firm to send a demand letter to Jay-Z and to initiate legal proceedings against him in the New York action. I ultimately decided to dismiss the New York action because I was frightened by the reaction of Jay-Z and his supporters, and the likelihood that I would have to be publicly named and subjected to public attacks. Jay-Z and his attorneys made numerous public statements attacking the veracity of my claims, and I am informed and believe that he sent investigators looking for me. I understand that even my attorneys have been sued by Jay-Z. I was not prepared to undergo years of attacks, intimidation, and harassment, and ultimately chose to dismiss my claims after certain negotiations among the attorneys involved in the New York action. How you talking about some motherfucking years of attacks and you ain't been doing shit? These allegations ain't been present but about 5 months. What you talking about years? Need your ass whooped, but let me not say that. That's my opinion. I declare under penalty of perjury, under the laws of the state of California, that the foregoing is true and correct. This whole shit is perjury. Need your ass locked up. Weak ass declaration. But y'all let me know what y'all think of all this, man. That motherfucker Tony Busby is a demon. I'm sorry. That is my opinion. I believe he is a demon. Because I don't think Jane Doe, I think she's willing to go forth on his behalf, right? I do think that because I'm sure to some degree she does feel like he's been operating in her best interest if she doesn't know any better. But I personally feel that that entire document was carefully crafted by Tony Busby. All she had to do was sign off on it. All he had to do was say, hey, I'm going to let them know that you were approached. This happened, that happened, and just sign off on it and tell me, that you're cool with it. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to make sure Jay-Z, because already, even in Jay-Z's paperwork, he already told us that we're going to file this. He said that he has an admission from Jane Doe that she told him ahead of time that they were going to do this if he came out and voiced her actual admission of lying. Come on. But yeah, man, I wish Jay-Z all the best in his pursuits in both Alabama federal court and in California. I hope that he's got all the necessary documentation that he needs to prove himself correct, because we not going with that shit, man. We know that shit false. We know that shit wasn't real. We know that shit wasn't right. So I'm hoping that, I hate to say it, but I hope that he completely crumbles Tony Busby's multi-billion-dollar empire. He's built an empire off of these types of cases, filing false bullshit against people, sensationalizing it in the media, trying to publicly embarrass people so that they feel like they have to come and file a settlement rather than going through public scrutiny. I don't think that's okay. I don't think that's cool, especially when you know that the shit is false. But you're leveraging people's public reputation against them to say, hey, either pay up or we're going to ruin you. No, but put his ass in that hot seat. Let his ass dance on the motherfucking coals. That's how I feel about it. That's just my opinion, though. Let me know what y'all think down below in the comments. Be sure to like and share this video. If it's your first time seeing me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Become an insider. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.
King of my city and cul-de-sac. Coming out swinging like soldier rags. Leading my people like quarterback. Boy, I study this shit, I'm an almanac. Had to get up and grind. Knowledge is booming, I'm here to apply. Came with the chip and the dip, it just single the mile. We finna do more than survive. I need my check. Spinning the block for the Gouda. We hitting the jeweler to flood out the net. We don't do beef on computers, I'm straight out the sewer. We come when you rest. Niggas be looking perplexed, so keeping my foot on their neck. No map, I trust my gut for the quest. With drama, I'm fully abreast. I was ready for years and they doubted me. All of a sudden they tell me they proud of me. I've been dropping these haters like calories. Cross them out, I came back with some boundaries. Stand for my honor, but too raw, no corner. Packing the stick with a drummer. Wanna catch my bad, won't fumble. I done came too far to be humble.